your site tonight.
Oh, wow.
Shir is in honor of Raphael Eliezer ben Nachum. Is your site tonight. Amen.
Okay, so the topics that were sent out, all right, we're going to discuss the subjects of saying Kriya Shema on time, the subject of cutting boards, milchik versus fleshik, etc., and the subject of if you found. So in a situation where you're davening and there is a sefer that fell on the floor, are you allowed to move to pick up the sefer? Or how about, davening Shemoneh Esrei. Or let's say a child is crying. Can you get up and pick up the child or calm the child down in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei? What can you do? So the halacha is that obviously we know we're in Shemoneh Esrei as opposed to the other sections and parts of prayer. We are standing in front of God. It's our personal audience with Hashem. And therefore, it's much more severe and stringent in the laws of making interval than any other part of davening. And that's why we cannot say hello, we cannot answer Amen Heshmei Rabba, we can't do anything else. And in fact, the Mishnah says that even if a snake comes at you, you're not allowed to move. Right? It says in mafsiki, not allowed to make an interval. So this would seem that definitely a sitter on the floor or a baby crying is not a matter of danger.
Sorry to be clear. If a scorpion comes,
nefesh, yes, you can. Yes. If a scorpion comes, or as also the Gemara says, a Melech Yisrael says hello to you, and you don't say hello back, they'll kill you, then you can say hello back. So the thing says, Melech Yehuda, if the king of Judah comes and says hello, he understands you're middle of Shemoneh Esrei. If the king of Israel comes and says hello and you don't say hello back, you're not going to have a head after Shemoneh Esrei. So you got to say hello back. No. Back in the time of the Judean and the Samaria monarchies. That's what it's referring to. So because they weren't God-fearing, the kings of what's called Israel back then. So this would seem to imply that no, you're not allowed to stop and make a hefsek. But the truth is, the place will explain the following: the isser that it's talking about, that you're not allowed to make an interval, even if there's a snake wrapped around your heel, that's an interval of talking. But to move your feet, you're allowed to move your feet to get him out of the way. And in fact, we find in Shemoneh Esrei, even though we don't practically do this anymore, that if a person has to release gas in front of God and comes back. So we see that there is movement going on, and it's not a case of sakana, it's not a case of danger. So movement is a lot more lenient than speech. And based on this, the place can write, this is in Aruch HaShulchan, that if your baby is crying and you're unable to pay attention, to concentrate on the prayer, you are allowed to walk up to the baby and pick him up or calm him down, without talking, of course, and then go back to Shemoneh Esrei. Another option would be regarding a sefer. If a sefer fell on the floor, you do not have an obligation to pick it up. You may continue Shemoneh Esrei. But if it's bothering your concentration, it's bothering your kavanah, you know the whole time the sefer's on the floor, and this is really getting them, then not because of honor of the sefer, but in order to clear your mind, you are allowed to go up to the sefer, pick it up, and go back to continue Shemoneh Esrei. I once saw a chazan in a shtibel who, in the middle of Shemoneh Esrei, like he had just started, he already bowed down, it was clear that he started, went over to someone in the back of the shul, told him he was talking, and went back to continue Shemoneh Esrei.
Which sounds permissible.
Which, yes, if it was really bothering him that much, if this person in the back of the shul was talking, then yeah, technically it is permissible, but that's only if it'll work. Generally, when you tell somebody to be quiet, they talk more. And, it depends.
So certainly somebody else's phone or your own phone going off bothering the whole?
Of course, you're allowed to shut it off.
Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody else's phone even, I would imagine, right? They're not aware.
Yeah. You're allowed to shut it off. You're allowed to move for the sake of removing distractions. Okay. So let's begin now with Shema. I can answer your question privately. I don't think it's.
I really.
So we all know that there is a positive command in the Torah, that at night and by day a Jew, a male Jew, has a command of saying Shema, reminding himself and verbalizing the unification of God, and that his love for him and his fear for him, etc. So the Chachamim learn in the Gemara and Brachos and the Mishnah that there's a certain time gap for each one of these mitzvahs, the mitzvah of Shema by night and the mitzvah by Shema by day. The mitzvah of Shema by night begins, as we know, with nightfall. It says Akichav. Even those who daven Ma'ariv early from Plag, which is allowed according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, they hold that that's only regarding the rabbinical mitzvah of davening Shema Esrei of Ma'ariv. But regarding the biblical command of Shema, they agree that you must repeat Shema at night, and that's why anyone who ever davened Ma'ariv early must repeat Shema at night to fulfill the biblical command. Till what time does a person have to say Shema? From the letter of the law, they have until Aleis HaShachar, until daybreak. So it's a very long time. And now in the winter, it's nighttime already at, let's say 5 o'clock. We have from 5 until about 4 in the morning. 3:30, 4 in the morning. 5 is an 8.
And 5 is
Yeah, that's past the lace. So till the lace.
so the time when
Man Mishayakir is
say
past the
before?
lace. Mishayakir is 60 minutes before sunrise, which is way after lace. So you have until Aleis HaShachar to be able to say Shema L'Chatchila. So you have a very long time throughout the night to say it. And nonetheless, the L'Chatchila, a person is always supposed to say it before midnight. So for whatever reason, a person did not yet daven Ma'ariv, and midnight is approaching, and let's say they have a 1 o'clock in the morning minyan. It happens. You have a 1 o'clock in the morning minyan, which is after Chatzos, or let's say now, you have a minyan at 11:45. It's after Chatzos today. So what you should do is say Shema first, so you got it in before Chatzos. And then you can daven Shema, you daven Ma'ariv with the minyan, you daven regular Ma'ariv. But the point is, the Chatchila person is supposed to say Shema before Chatzos, but nonetheless, the biblical command is fulfilled so long as a person gets it in before nighttime. Before daytime, daybreak. Now, what's the reason that you have such a long period? Because that's what the word says. It says, when you're lying, a person is sleeping for those many hours. When it gets dark, a person back then would go to sleep. And they would wake up until dawn. They would sleep till dawn. They would wake up only from dawn and onwards. So therefore, during that entire period of nighttime, it is permissible to say Shema. Daytime comes Aleis HaShachar, begins the mitzvah of saying the morning Shema. It says Ukumecha. The Chanan learn when you start getting up. When did people back in the day? I'm not talking about today. Today, maybe only a baker or someone going on a trip wakes up by dawn. But back in the day, people would wake up by dawn. And, at least miktsas anash, some people. So, therefore, the time of Shema officially begins with dawn, and how long does it continue for? We have here two options. One option is to say, just like nighttime continues the whole night, the daytime Shema continues the whole day. So one approach is to say, is that you can say the day Shema until sunset. Just like you can say the night Shema from nightfall until daybreak. So too, you should be able to say the day Shema from daybreak until sunset.
Doesn't seem right.
Right, it doesn't seem right. And what's the reason? But this is an approach. Let's throw out an option there, and if it's not correct, let's understand why it's not correct, okay? So, we are all familiar with the idea of Zman Tefillah and Zman Kriya Shema. Where did it come from, and why do we have it? How did it come about? Is it biblical? Is it rabbinical? How severe is it? What's its root? What's its source? So, everyone agrees that there's a concept called Zman Kriya Shema Shel Shachris. That's a Mishnah in Brachos. That's undebatable. That there is a gap of time that a person is able to say Kriya Shema Shel Shachris, and if he passes that time, there is some something is going wrong with that mitzvah. Now the question is, what is going wrong with that mitzvah? The wording in the Mishnah is as follows. A person can begin saying it with daybreak, it's really from sunrise, not from daybreak, but b'diavad it's really minadin, it's from daybreak, okay? And there's a machlekes there in the Mishnah, but bottom line, we're like Rabbi Yeshua, that a person can say it up to 3 hours into the day. Some say you can only say it till sunrise. Some opinions say that you can only say it till sunrise, and that's why the Chatchila, even today, Halacha l'maaseh, if you ever wake up before sunrise, now it's a little hard because we just changed the clock, so now it's like 5:30 or something, 5:45. So you have to wake up earlier. You should always try to get it in before sunrise. Because even though we don't rule like this opinion, nonetheless it is a mitzvah namucha to say it before sunrise. However, the way we rule is that you have 3 hours pass, well it doesn't say pass, it just says 3 hours into the day. Okay? So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua. And then he says, and if you didn't, it's as if you're reading from the Torah. That's the wording of the Mishnah. How do we understand that Mishnah? The Kesef Mishnah, which is the Beis Yosef, right, and his commentary on the Rambam, he writes something revolutionary. It says like this. One way of understanding this Mishnah is that the biblical command of the Dibarta Bam of saying Shema is only fulfilled within those 3 hours that the Mishnah stated. Another way of understanding the Mishnah is that biblically you can say Shema the whole day. If you said Shema an hour before sunset, you fulfill the biblical command of the day Shema. What's our proof? Just like the nighttime. Just like the nighttime, the whole nighttime is valid, so too there's no reason to put a gap on the daytime. The whole daytime is valid. So what's this Mishnah saying, putting a 3 hour gap? The Chachamim, the sages came along and said, this is the best opportune time. We all agree, and it's a very similar concept that we all agree with. Tefillah. Everyone agrees that Zman Tefillah is the Rabbi. No one argues on that. So we agree there's a concept of taking a biblical command and limiting it to a specific time. Maybe it's the same thing with Shema. The biblical command can be fulfilled throughout the day. And the sages put a gap of time which it initially used to be said. This is the way the Kesef Mishnah learns, and it's very revolutionary. But practically, it is not the way we rule. The way we rule is that the understanding of the Mishnah is that the biblical command of saying Shema can only be fulfilled within the first 3 hours of the day. So if a person misses Man Kriya Shema, they've missed the biblical command, the rabbinical command. It's a mitzvah that can't be made up anymore. The mitzvah is gone. If they say Shema afterwards, it's as if they're reading a parsha in the Torah. They're learning Torah. They're not fulfilling the mitzvah of Krishna. This is the way we rule bottom line halacha, and that's why a person has to be very careful to say Shema on time. The Rebbe explains that the prayer of Shema every single day brings a certain hamshacha, draws down from above, alikus, godliness from above. And if a person misses the time, he misses the ability to bring that down forever. It's forever lost. It can never be made up. It's a ma'uvis she'ena yuchel l'taken. So now that we understand the final ruling and the severity of it, when is practically the final time? So we did a daily halacha on this, and there was so much information that I had to cut out a lot of information. So hopefully now I'll be able to get the full unedited, unabridged version of this idea. Zmanim in halacha, the times in halacha is a subject that's very complex in and of itself, just because we're dealing with a lot of calculations. But it's also added in complexity due to so much controversy and disputes amongst poskim. Now, in this regarding, we said 3 hours, that we agreed, there's a 3 hour period, which by the way, it's a little unclear from the Mishnah if that means at the start of the third hour or after 3 full hours have passed. That's a big difference. That's a 60-minute difference, those two statements. Ad shalosh shas is the wording of the Mishnah. Does that mean, let's say morning begins at 6. Does that mean till 8? Until the start of the third hour? So 2 hours, is that? Or does it mean ad b'chlal, full 3 hours? So the bottom line is the Rambam and Pirush HaMishnayos, the Rishonim, the Alter Rebbe, they all rule it includes a third hour. That's unanimous that we rule that way. I'm just saying from the Mishnah itself, it wasn't something that was clear. The Rambam had to go ahead and explain that, and other places had to go ahead and explicitly include that in. But nonetheless, we agree it's 3 hours. But when is morning? When is the start of morning? When does the clock start? So we have here three approaches. The three approaches in the Paiskim. I'm first going to tell you the most unconventional approach. And this approach says the following. It's not 3 hours from morning, but it's 3 hours past. They say the following. As we know, every single day has 24 hours, Jewish hours, and 12 night hours and 12 day hours. Now, they say the following thing. We calculate 6 hours from midnight. After 6 hours from midnight, that's officially when morning begins. It doesn't matter if it's dark outside or light outside. It doesn't matter what season we're in. It doesn't matter what area of the world we're in. Take midnight, which is usually 12 o'clock, but depending where you are in the world, it could be 11:40, it could be 12:20, because, our time system is not... Why do we have time zones? We have time zones in order to protect that the times will be together with the sun, right? Because we can't have if the sun is reaching the United States later, then we don't want to make believe in the United States right now. It's middle of, it will be daytime in the middle of the night. So the whole idea of time zones is because the sun is delaying its travel. It's not shining the world at the same time. So that would technically also mean that, let's, for example, Israel and Egypt, we are the same time zone on the clock. But we're not really the same time zone because the sun reaches us first. So we follow the Egyptian time zone and not the opposite. And what I mean by that is that let's say midday, 12 o'clock in Egypt is really here 11:40. The real midday that we follow 12 o'clock and they follow 12 o'clock is really only 12 o'clock for them. By us, it's really 11:40. That's why you can understand why the 7th hour here in Israel, we don't do Kiddush Friday night. Those who don't do, it's not from 6 to 7, but it's from 5:40 to 6:40. It's because of that. Because it's 6 hours from midday. And real midday for Israel is not the Egyptian time zone, it's the Israeli time zone. But if every time 5 minutes moved, you'd have a different time zone, the world would be crazy. So that's what had to make chunks for time zones. But in truth, the sun is not reaching all those areas at the same time. Okay, and then you can understand why this subject is complex. It gets very complex, this subject. So they say like this. Take 6 hours from midnight, which we're saying is 12 o'clock, at night, and add 3 hours. So in other words, basically till 9 o'clock, you can say Kriya Shema, winter, summer. That is the first approach. In other words, they would say that even if you're living right now in the North Pole or near Norway, and they have mostly nights, they're having maybe 2 hours, in the summer, they're having maybe 2 hours of nighttime. So they would say it doesn't matter, it goes from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock is Man Kriya Shema. Or even if it's during the winter, it's nighttime between 6 and 9 o'clock. 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock is Man Kriya Shema.
When you say 6 o'clock, it's a Jewish hour?
No.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Really?
Yeah, but depending on when midnight is. So depending on the time zone, as I said, what area of the time zone are they in? So, like I said, for here in Israel, this opinion would be not from 6 to 9, but it would be from 5:40 until 8:40. That you can say Kriya Shema every single day. So even when they publicize, say it's Man Kriya Shema as, let's say, 8 o'clock, they would say, no, it's always 8:40. Bottom line is that it's very interesting. This opinion was held up by many, many, many poskim. And it often ends up being later than all the other times. It is not in any calendar. You will not find this time mentioned in any calendar. Even the most sophisticated calendar that gives you all the opinions will not give you this opinion, because it's just been totally rejected.
What's it called? Do you have a name?
The Zman.
Is the first approach you're calling it?
It's the first approach. It doesn't have a name, really.
Because we have on the calendars.
I know. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a
Others
name.
do have a name, though.
Yes, this was the opinion of the Pnei Yeshua, was the opinion of some big Achronim, and this was followed in Europe by many, many groups of Yidden. But the Mishmer Shalom of Kadinov defends this practice. And so it did have its defenders, but bottom line is that it's extinct. Next approach. The next approach, which is something that is universal, which is accepted as an approach, is that you don't, this is a very strange calculation, a previous calculation, you're not actually following morning, you're following midnight, calculating 6 hours. No. The approach is very simple. The moment daybreak begins, which is daytime according to Halacha, we begin calculating 3 hours. And 3 hours from then is when Seisman Kriya Shema ends.
3 Zmanius hours.
I'll get to that.
Daytime is what?
I want to work one step at a time.
It's Alas Shachar is daytime?
Alayza Shachar, yeah.
That's daytime.
That's the beginning. Alayza Shachar daybreak, which now I believe it's, let's say 4. Okay, so daybreak would begin at 4, and so you would have 3 hours later. So let's just say each hour, for argument's sake, for now is 60 minutes. You would have from 4 to 7 to say Kriya Shema. This is the second.
Who's Alas Shachar, by the way?
What?
Who's Alas Shachar? There's more than one in there.
What do you mean who's?
Oh.
Oh. Yes, okay, let's hold that point. You have a point, you have a point. Let's hold those points. I told you it's complex. There's a lot of ingredients that come in here.
Whoever you go by.
So one step at a time to work this out. So, as I said, if we can assume a license at 4, so they would say 3 hours later. If we say each hour 60 minutes, it would be at 7. This is known as the approach of the Magen Avraham. Now, let me give you a little background here. There's a famous debate amongst the Rishonim with a long list on each side, okay, a very legitimate debate of each side, of whenever in Torah and all the different areas of Shulchan Aruch, which are so many, where we have day-night dependent commands, which there are many of, how do you calculate day? What is a day? So they don't deal with this individually by each mitzvah. They give a general rule that whenever there's a command dependent on the daytime, this is the definition of daytime. They say daytime is calculated from Aleis HaShachar until Tzeitzei Kichon, from daybreak until nightfall. That's one approach. Okay? That's how you calculate daytime. The second approach, no, we calculate daytime from sunrise to sunset. Let me explain what this means. If we say that a mitzvah can be fulfilled, let's say you have to burn your chametz by midday. When is midday? So we follow what's called Zmanius hours, Jewish hours, which are basically taking the daylight hours that you have in that day, dividing that by 12, and timings that by 6, right? 6 hours into the day is Chatzos, so from the beginning of the day you would add 6. Okay. Now, how do you measure how many hours? How do you measure how many minutes are within each hour? If I told you that, I'll explain as follows. If I say that daytime begins at daybreak, which is at 4 o'clock, and it ends at nightfall, which is at 6 o'clock, it's a lot of hours. If I say that it would begin, and I'm going to take all those hours that exist and divide that by 12, so I'm going to have more minutes in each hour. If in comparison to the other approach where I'm measuring from sunrise, which is at 6 o'clock, till sunset, which is at 5 o'clock, so I have less hours in between, each hour is less. So this is a debate amongst all Zman. Do you calculate the hours based on daybreak to nightfall, or do you calculate it from sunrise to sunset? And the Alter Rebbe in the Shulchan Aruch in most areas, takes the approach of daybreak to nightfall. And this is the approach of most places. And it says the Magen Avraham something as follows. Something interesting.
Doesn't change anyway.
Chatzos doesn't change?
Won't be the same. For both.
Chatzos will be the same, yes.
It's in the middle.
Yeah. The Magen Avraham says the following. In the case of Shema, there's no argument. Everyone agrees that since the first minute that you can start saying Shema is Aleis HaShachar, you must begin your 3 hour count from Aleis HaShachar. So even though we're aware of this big debate and we can choose who to paskin regarding different mitzvahs, but let's for example, burning chametz, no one says that the start time of burning chametz is from daybreak. You can burn chametz whenever you want. The second you have a mitzvah that has a clock that begins, and then you're told you have 3 hours. So if you're told it begins by Aleis HaShachar, that means that 3 hours begins at Aleis HaShachar. So even though there's something you say when you calculate day, you calculate from sunrise, in this situation we don't. This is what the Magen Avraham says, and it's very logical what he's saying. And so therefore he rules that, irrelevant to that debate, everyone should agree on Kriya Shema, Zman Kriya Shema. The 3 hours begin by daybreak and go onwards. So yes, you would then take the amount of hours in the day divided by 12 and add that amount. So let's say in the summer we have a lot of daytime hours, it would be 75 minutes per hour. It's a big number, right? So we do 75 times 3, add that from daybreak, and that would be 6 Zman Kriya Shema.
According to approach 2.
So this is approach 2, and this is the opinion of the Magen Avraham. This is what's listed in the calendars as the Magen Avraham. And it's not just the Magen Avraham, it's the majority of Poskim. The majority of Poskim are of this opinion. And the Alter Rebbe himself in the Shulchan Aruch is of this opinion. In Hilchos Kriya Shema, he writes that we calculated starting from Alois, and we calculate the day from Alois Seisach Chavim, so, that's the calculation that's done.
Wait a second, that wouldn't line up with the, when is Alois Shachar now then?
Oh, so the only thing we're left with is, in this opinion is, when is Alois Shachar? Agreed. Okay, so we're doing it from Alois Shachar, because that's when we agree that the beginning time of doing the mitzvah begins. But when is Alois? So we discussed this in the past, all the opinions about Alois, and that's why the approach 2, which is based on the Magen Avraham, is the most complex of all the approaches. Approach 1 is the most simple. It's the most simple. You don't have to know anything. Every hour, 60 minutes. Just know where you are, what latitude you are in the world. Know when your real midnight is. If it's 12 o'clock or 11:40, add 6 hours to that. Add 3 more hours. That's 6 months. It's very simple, the first approach, but extinct. We don't follow it. Second approach, the Magen Avraham approach, is the most complex because you have to do a calculation of how many hours in the day, which is based on the start of Alois, and you have to then figure out when is Alois, which you have so many opinions about when is Alois. So in the end of the day is that you basically have what they show in calendars, Zman Magen Avraham, that's not an agreeable time. You will have some who say Zman Magen Avraham is 8:40. You will have others who say Zman Magen Avraham is 8:30. Others will say it's 8:10. What are they arguing over? I thought everyone knows what Magen Avraham wrote. It says calculate from Alois. What do you suddenly, how could someone write a time that's almost as if it's a third opinion when we know clearly what the Magen Avraham held? So the reason is because how you calculate when daybreak begins. When is daybreak? That's a question in and of itself.
The Magen Avraham didn't have a specific way of calculating that he held by?
Yeah, but even if he did, we don't necessarily rule like him in that specific matter. So in other words, there isn't. No, the Magen Avraham does not. We don't have a clear opinion of him of when Alois Shachar begins. And as I said before, when we write down Zman Magen Avraham, we're just using him as the namesake of that time. But it's a whole bunch of opinions behind him. It's a team that calculate from Alois. But that doesn't mean everyone on the team agrees about all the details. They don't. And therefore, you will see in some calendars, Zman Magen Avraham is following a 72-minute Alois, which means is that they say the following. Alois Shachar began 72 minutes before sunrise, and from there you calculate the 3 fluctuating hours. Others will, like in Yerushalayim, the Yerushalmi calendars, calculate Alois as 90 minutes before sunrise, and then calculate 3 hours. So their Magen Avraham time is about 20 minutes earlier than other calendars' Magen Avraham time, and that's the minhag of the Sfardim. The minhag of the Sfardim, as writes the Chidah, is like the Magen Avraham, as well as to follow the 90 minutes. So
That's Spartan.
yes, Sfardim. So they follow the earlier time.
Yerushalayim follows which again? The 90 minutes, you said, no?
That's
72.
Yerushalayim.
That's Yerushalayim.
Yeah.
They follow the Sephardim.
And there's a third? There's a third number of minutes?
Well, most of the world, what in most calendars are portraying is the 72-minute Alois. So you will never see Magen Avraham Alter Rebbe. You will never see Seis Zman Kriya Shema through Magen Avraham based on the Alter Rebbe's Alois. You'll never see it. Nobody does the calculation. The Alter Rebbe's Alois is 120 minutes before sunrise. So
72, 90, and 120, apples to apple. I mean,
Yeah.
120 is the Alter Rebbe.
correct. The Alter Rebbe, well, there's a lot more in between. Those are the basics. There's about 6 different opinions.
So this Shema time would be much earlier then, right?
If you held of the Magen Avraham and you also held of the Chum of the Alter Rebbe and Alois, Seis Zman Kriya Shema will be like you just woke up, it's already Seis Zman Kriya Shema. It would be very soon. It would be like, a half hour earlier than the Zman and the Magen Avraham.
But your hours are longer.
Correct. So that's why it ends up, even though you gained, you're calculating about 42 minutes back, but you're dividing those 42 minutes by 12, don't forget. So how much you're actually gaining in those 3 hours. 8 minutes, 9 minutes, you're not gaining that much. So you're losing more than you're gaining because you're calculating almost an hour, could be even an hour back. Okay, there's a lot more complex things here. How do you measure 72 minutes? That's another subject in of itself. We're going to leave that just because.
So what about the 2 times?
So now I'm up to the third approach. So now we're up to the third approach. So this was all in the second approach. The third approach it negates everything in the second approach and says, no, even regarding Command Kriya Shema, we have something very funny. We're doing halachic acrobatics here. We're beginning daytime at Aleis HaShachar, that you can start fulfilling the mitzvah biblically, which is the halacha that we don't argue on, from Aleis HaShachar, from daybreak, whichever opinion you hold like, 72, 120, 95, 90, 96, whatever you hold like, whatever Aleis is according to halacha, you can start doing the mitzvah. We all agree on that. But the clock, second one, doesn't begin till sunrise.
There's a gap between.
Yeah, there's a gap between the start of the clock of 3 hours and the start time that you can officially start saying Kriya Shema.
So there could be a 72-minute difference, 90 minutes, 120, a big difference.
So Aleis will not make any difference according to this opinion, because they start the clock from sunrise. Sunrise is a given time. There's not much dispute on that.
So you just know when sunrise.
Thank God we cannot have dispute over when sunrise is. Sun has gone up. I mean, maybe a minute or two difference we can have, but we're not having 72, 96, 120 differences here between regarding sunrise. We all know as soon as sunrise is seen, the 120, the 3 hours begin. Furthermore, they calculate through the hours, the Zmanis hours is when, from sunrise to sunset. So there's less minutes within the hours, but because you're counting it from sunrise, it always ends up being a later time than Magen Avraham.
What's that called?
So this opinion is the opinion. This opinion is as follows. It basically follows the approach in Poskim and Rishonim that whenever we measure hours, we always measure from sunrise to sunset, not from daybreak. But it negates the approach of the Magen Avraham who said that's true. Kriya Shema is an exception, but Kriya Shema, everyone agrees this is how it's done. Who's the one who went ahead and argued the Magen Avraham and then said, no, even here we do it from sunrise to sunset? The Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe.
Oh, that's what he said.
The Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe and other poskim took the approach that even regarding Kriya Shema, that the start time is daybreak, nevertheless the clock only starts from sunrise, which is a little strange, and we have to agree, it sounds a little weird, but that's the...
So you could still say it before.
Yeah, you said it before.
You'll not...
Of course, yeah, the mitzvah of to say before sunrise.
So the clock starting is before so the end time.
Yeah,
That was
sunrise
my
starts.
mistake. I was thinking that we only say from the sunrise.
No. It's a mitzvah, even better to say it before the time starts. It's a mitzvah to say before the clock begins. Yeah, so it creates a little bit of a strange... What I said before, what the Magen Avraham said is very logical. It makes a lot of sense. Now, this third approach is the approach of the Alter Rebbe and the Gra. It's basically the approach that started to be followed in their times. Until the times, everyone followed either the first approach or the second approach. Nobody really followed this third approach. And what we have to ask is, what revolutionized this approach to come about? And do we hold it today? What revolutionized this third approach? What was wrong with the second approach? The Alter Rebbe himself in the Shulchan Aruch liked the second approach. Only in the Siddur, when he wrote his Siddur, about 20 years later, did he rule like the third approach. What forced him to take this third approach? Why the change? And it's so funny that him and the Gra agree. How did they suddenly agree on this?
Even on anything, they didn't really agree on what she's saying. They didn't agree on it.
So, so the explanation is like this. It's a very interesting explanation that the Sefer Shulchan gives. I don't kind of know. He writes the following. It wasn't that the Vilna Gaon was sitting in his base medrash, the Alter Rebbe was sitting in his base medrash, they were sitting and learning, and they both discovered suddenly, wow, I just saw the light, oh my gosh, what I wrote in my Shulchan Aruch, what all Klal Yisrael has been doing till now is really incorrect, and we really have more time for Kriya Shema. I have the greatest Jewish news on earth. You can sleep for another half hour, you have another, half hour to say Kriya Shema now every single morning. That's not what happened. What happened was like this, as it says in Shulchan. In other words, it's not that they changed their opinion, that at first they held of the Magen Avraham, and then they decide, you know what, this opinion looks more attractive, looks more correct. It's very simple. Until the mid-1700s, the custom of the Jewish world was on a totally different issue to follow the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam regarding the time of night. That when is nighttime? Not sunset, but rather 72 minutes after sunset. Tzeis Kichav. And Bein HaShmashos was about a few minutes beforehand. They held, this is how the world held. When we stop doing Malacha by Shkia, when we see sunset happening, and the siren goes up, and we don't do any Malacha, we see someone smoking a cigarette or lighting a match, lighting candles after sunset, it's an Issa D'Oraisa. If we go back 300 years ago, everybody was doing that. People did Malacha until the Shkia of Rabbeinu Tam.
Until nightfall, which is...
Till Bein HaShmashos of Rabbeinu Tam, which is about 40 minutes later.
40 minutes. Safe.
Yeah.
They do it until what we call...
No, until Bein HaShmashos. Everyone agrees Bein HaShmashos, you have to stop. The question is, when is Bein HaShmashos? The Go'anim hold it's by Shkia, by sunset, which is how we follow. But go back 300 years ago, the whole world held that it's Rabbeinu Tam, Shkia, which is not already what we call nighttime. Look outside, we'll call it night. He calls it, no, it's still day.
Sfadim also?
Everybody does. So if you look in all the halachic texts and all the halachic works till and including the 1700s, everyone wrote that Shabbos ends the time of Rabbeinu Tam and Shabbos enters the time of Rabbeinu Tam. No one even mentioned the opinion of this approach of sunset. What happened?
Not to mention 18
In
minutes.
Not
to mention 18 minutes before, or 30 minutes, or half an hour before.
No, yeah, it didn't exist. Those chumras didn't exist. Comes the late 1700s, and the slowly Jewish communities begin adapting the chumrah of the Go'anim, which is basically that Shkia is Bein HaShmashos. That's when it's Safek, questionably night, and that's when you can only do Malacha. This caused that, and we don't really know how this happened. Who started this revolution? We know the Alter Rebbe wrote backing this opinion, but the Alter Rebbe was really backing the new custom, that came about. We don't know that much information how that happened. But bottom line, like this: once the custom became to treat sunset as like the beginning of nighttime, you can no longer do calculations from daybreak to night, because once sunset is already nighttime, how can you do from daybreak to night? You understand what I'm saying? How can you do it till Tzeis Kichav? If you hold that sunset is already, after sunset is nighttime like the Go'anim, how can you make your calculation of the daylight hours from daybreak till Tzeis Kichav and Rabbeinu Tam?
Which is later.
Which is already what we're holding regarding Shabbos as nighttime. So you have to be consistent. So therefore you also have to change the ruling that we all followed of how to calculate the daytime hours. So you have to rearrange that and calculate from sunrise to sunset. And therefore Seisman Krishna is 3 hours from sunrise. That's the explanation behind their opinion. Yeah. Bottom line is that majority of Ashkenazi Jewry in the Lashon of the Igros Moshe accepted the ruling of the Gra and the Alter Rebbe, that we follow Seisman Krishna of the Alter Rebbe and the Gra, 3 hours from sunrise. And therefore, min adin, from the level of the law, you can say Kriya Shema till that time. So if a person missed Seisman Magen Avram, and they're before Seisman Alter Rebbe, they didn't lose the mitzvah deraisa. There's no difference in that mitzvah deraisa. They can still fulfill it, and they still have to fulfill it, and make it before the time. The Igros Moshe writes in a tshuva that only Yechidei Gula were makbid to do the earlier time of Magen Avram, but everyone in Lita did the later time of the Alter Rebbe.
Mechaber, where he held.
Mechaber Shulchan Aruch. I just explained the whole history. When did he live?
So he would have to be. He lived in the 17th century, 16th century.
Yeah, 16th century. So they followed the Rabbeinu Tam. He held of the earlier calculation.
He held by
Magen Avram. Yeah. They all held of the earlier. So
in the Mishnah Brura.
The Mishnah Brura brings both. He doesn't. He says something funny. He says like this. It's a very interesting approach that the Mishnah Brura did. So this is, of course, a famous debate, and we're waiting. Many Jews follow the Mishnah Brura's opinion. The Mishnah Brura brings it down. What's he going to say? How's he going to rule? He says like this, guys. The dispute makes no difference, because in any event you have to say Shema as early as possible, as soon as you wake up. And Rabbi writes, say Shema as soon as possible. So if you woke up before the time of Magen Avram, forget about this dispute. You still have to say Shema right away, no matter who you hold like. So say Shema right away. Now, if you didn't wake up in time of Magen Avram, then what choice do you have? You have nothing to lose by saying Shema now. You already lost the time of Magen Avram. You understand what he said? He said, there's no need to make an arbitration here.
Well, but back then it was considered deraisa. We weren't doing it to rice if you didn't do it by Magen Avraham time.
Correct, so that's past. Did I do the mitzvah, did I not do the mitzvah? He says on arbitration about the future, should you do it, regardless, if you woke up between Magen Avraham time and Al Rebbe time, you should say Shema, of course. Bottom line is that he avoided making arbitration here, so we don't have a Mishnah Berurah's opinion in this regard. But one more point, which I made very clear in the daily halacha, which the Alter Rebbe makes clear, is that in the end of the day, there's a twist. There's a little bit of a twist here. The Alter Rebbe then writes, nonetheless, a person should not push the limits and, wait for the last moment, and therefore he should say Shema before the end time of 3 hours from sunrise. How much earlier, says Alter Rebbe? 45 minutes. 45 minutes before Seisman Kriya Shema of Gra and Alter Rebbe, you should say Shema before the 45 minutes. Which ends up being that if we follow this ruling of Alter Rebbe, which we do, that we will actually say Shema before the end time of Magen Avraham. In most cases, 45 minutes is before the end time of the Magen Avraham. So it's funny that in the end of the day, Lubavitch Chassidim are supposed to be makbid to say Kriya Shema within the time of Magen Avraham to make those 45 minutes. But if you missed it, on your conscience, you don't have to feel that you didn't do the mitzvah. You're still doing the mitzvah. So these are the complexities of Zman Tefillah, of Zman Kriya Shema. As we see, these are some very...
What time is that now? What time is that? Not the 45 minutes, but the actual 3 hours now after sunrise is what? 8:30 something.
The Alter Rebbe's now is about 8:40, and the Magen Avraham is like 8 o'clock. So do the 40 minutes beforehand, 45 minutes beforehand, and you have to do it by 7:50. And if you're doing the best of the best, super Jew, you're doing it before sunrise. You have to wake up at 5:30.
If you said the first paragraph only.
Yeah, there's a machlekes there's a machlekes which paragraphs you have to say. Some say it's only Shema, some say also Ba'afta, some say also Leiv Shemaya. The best one is to say all three.
And eating versus drinking before Shema, what's the...
If you say the first one, it's okay. If you said the first paragraph, it's okay.
You can eat after saying the first paragraph.
Yeah.
I mean the first, not the first line, the first.
First line in the first paragraph, yeah.
Wait, Shema Yisrael, that paragraph, that line.
Shema Yisrael is 1, the Hafta is 2, and behind Shema is 3. So ideally, you should say all three of them to fulfill the mitzvah because there's different opinions.
But eating before.
For eating, yeah, you just say the first Shema and the Hafta, the paragraph, and you're good.
And not bread.
Not what?
We don't eat, right? We don't eat bread. Okay, any questions on this complex subject? Okay. You're in the middle of eating soup, or hopefully you're not in the middle of eating soup, you're in the middle of serving soup or chilling, and you find worms or bugs. Ever happen?
If it is a fly.
Really?
Never.
Yeah,
fly.
You find, okay, so you're checking your rice. You're checking legumes for bugs, or whatever it is, and you find bugs inside.
Before it's cooked, you mean?
Before it's cooked, after it's cooked. Well, let's open up the whole discussion.
All right.
You found bugs inside of your food. My question is the following. Obviously, you can't eat the bugs. We know that. You get rid of the bugs. What's the status of the rest of this food? Can I continue eating this bowl of soup? Can I continue eating this cholent? Can I serve this food to my family, to the students in the yeshiva? Do I have to throw out this bag of rice?
No.
What if I found one bug? What if I found 20 bugs?
So it's 1/60th, no?
What do you mean 1/60th?
In other words, if the total volume of the bugs...
Right. So that's what you're bringing up in 160 is in a case that a good tasting bug got cooked in your soup, and you took out the bug.
All right.
Here we're talking about not. Let's say it's dry goods. Nothing was cooked together. Okay. So, but even in the case of cooked, our suspicion is perhaps there's still bugs inside. In other words, we all know if you found one cockroach, you kill it. You find 2 cockroaches, you're getting a little worried. You find 3, you have an infestation. So, what's the rule in Halacha? There's a lot of misconception. Well, the Shulchan Aruch says the following in the laws of Tugla, near a day. Obviously, it's never permitted to eat bugs, generally, right? I think we discussed the exceptional cases.
Whole bugs.
It's never permitted to eat bugs. So obviously, whatever bug you see in a food, you must get rid of. However, just because a food has proven to be infested doesn't mean that all that food is tainted and must be thrown out. What it does mean is that now you have an obligation to check it to get rid of any bugs that it has. So if you find a bag of rice and you even look from the outside and you see that there's 10 flies in this bag, if you want, you can throw it out. I guess there's no prohibition in that. We won't call it baltashkas because it's understandable that someone is maybe repulsed by it. But if somebody wants to get his money's worth, he can go ahead and check that bag of rice and throw out all the bugs he finds and serve it and eat it, and it's 100% kosher. Oh, but you found more than 3 bugs inside. There's no such rule. 3 or more bugs invalidates a food. There's no such rule. The rule is that if there's infestation, you must check. Furthermore, even if this current food, we don't know if it has infestation. If it's a food that generally can have at least 10% of infestation, you have to check. All the things that we check in kashrus for bugs are because they have what's called a miyut hamatzui, a common minority of a chance of there being bugs inside. And that's why we check them, because of that suspicion. Okay? And the ruling that we follow is 10%. So if 1 out of every 10 bags of rice can have a bug inside, so therefore we require rice to be checked for bugs. Now, this is all if it's checkable, which is usually before it's cooked. What if I already cooked it? Like in a soup or in a cholent. So then the halacha changes. Since when infestation has been proven, you have an obligation to check it for bugs. Therefore, if you can't check it for bugs, you can't eat it. So it's written in Shulchan Aruch that a person made a stew, and he found 1 bug, pick it up and throw it out. You don't even eat 60 times. You know why? You cook the bug inside, you have all the bug tastes in your food now. There's no 60 times. Let's say it was a huge bug, one of those big hornets. Right? You don't have to. You don't eat 60 times because bugs don't add good taste to your food. They don't have good flavor, and it's called nascent time pagam. Gives a blemished, a bad flavor. So your food remains kosher.
What?
Your food remains kosher.
If you have 1 bug in a cooked food, you said you have to throw it out.
Yeah, and the rest of the food remains kosher.
Oh, you throw the bug
Don't
out.
get the bug out.
Yes,
Yeah.
the bug doesn't become kosher.
Right. You throw
Cooking
all
it
the
doesn't
food
matter.
out. The bug.
No. You throw the bug out and eat the food.
Really?
Yes. You found 2 bugs. Throw both bugs out and eat the food. You found 3 bugs. Now comes the Shulchan Aruch and says, stop. You got to check the entire. And there's a machlekes. Some say actually there's a machlekes in Chazak between Rabbi and Chacham. Some say Rabbi says that even after 2 times, it's considered a status quo. We have to suspect that it's infested. He uses this in a lot of areas of Shas. For example, for a wife to be called a lover, say basically a black widow, how many husbands have to die? 2 or 3. That's a machlekes. Some say 2 husbands, some say 3 husbands for her to be considered a black widow. And
What is the deal?
it's a machlekes and Shulchan Aruch.
What's the implication of that?
The implication is that we won't let her marry if she's a black widow. We want men dying. We don't want men dying. So if she has already 2 or 3 husbands that died when they married her, we see this woman, it doesn't go, men are allergic to her. Something's going wrong here. And I think police work the same way when they see, a woman who's now claiming the death of her 3rd husband, or they begin, unless she's 100 years old, 40-year-old woman getting the death of her 3rd husband, they begin worrying a little bit. Let's investigate the deaths of these husbands.
There is.
So too. Also by a man. Yes, there's also.
There is a woman here
Black
in
widow.
Tzfat, I won't say who's on her 3rd husband, so obviously was permitted to marry.
Correct. I said there's a machlekes between 2 and 3. Machlekes between 2 and 3. So, Nonetheless, if there's 3, it's for certain that the person has to then check this food and cannot continue eating. So in this case, the Mechaber says like this: the cholent is uncheckable. How are you going to check cholent? How are you going to check cholent for bugs? It's impossible. You throw the whole thing out.
Another reason why you don't eat cholent, I keep telling you.
But with 1 or 2 bugs, the cholent isn't.
Even in soup, it says. In soup, what you can do is as follows. You have to strain the water, the gravy, the broth, and then you you can drink that. And you have to wash the vegetables. You have to take each vegetable out individually that's whole, and then you'll be able to eat it. So bottom line is, if you found three bugs floating on your pot of soup, then you can't just get rid of the bugs and continue eating your soup. It's a problem. You have to either throw it out or go through the pain of filtering it. But you can salvage the potatoes, all that big stuff. Take it out and wash it, and you're good.
What if you're grossed out even by one bug, you feel like it's contaminated, or just grossed out by it?
Yeah, that's not halacha.
You don't have to, but can you? Are you allowed to?
It's not baltashkas.
It's not baltashkas.
It's not baltashkas because of the person's repulsed. It's not considered baltashkas. Person's repulsed.
You have an obligation to tell your guests.
No, why do you have an obligation? I mean, it's
All right.
Well, you're sitting there and everybody's going to come.
That's the first two. This is the first two. The third one, you have an obligation to throw it out.
Listen, you have an obligation. I mean, you know what goes on in hotels and it goes on in catering.
Don't want to know.
I know, but we eat.
No, I know.
I'm sure we eat out. And all this stuff goes on there, and they don't throw it out. They go by. They want to save money, you know. So, there's. Anyways, okay.
You get all kinds of things. Like picnics, you get bugs landing on food all the time, right? We don't have picnic. You have to be careful. What about that? You got bugs landing, flying bugs landing on.
Yeah, it's why it's not such a good idea to have meals outside when it's the very buggy season and there's infestations outside.
But what about a bug doesn't transmit tumor when it's there is no concept like that?
Tumor?
Tumor.
Regarding the laws of Tumor and Tahara?
Tumor.
Yeah, I understand, but regarding which law? Kashrus laws?
Yeah. I mean, in the food, if it is liquid,
It would still prohibit the food. You can't eat a food that has a bug in it.
and the liquid also.
Well, if there's a bug stuck in that liquid that we don't see, we cannot eat it, yeah. It's called yavish balach. The idea of 60 times is, it has limitations, it has qualifications, it's not just a rule you can use whenever you want, 60 times. For example, let's give an example. If you know for certain that there's a bug that got lost in your cholent, you just can't find it. You can't not eat any of the cholent. We don't say, the only way you'll be allowed to eat the cholent is if you put it through a food processor and you turn it into cholent juice. So then it's all butter.
Really?
Everything's not.
You grind up a bug, it's okay? And you
Yes, that's why if you could notice in a lot of these moderate hashkafas, mahadran hashkafas, or even not mahadran hashkafas, they would write on certain foods that have bug infestation, only eat it through grinding, through putting through a food processor. Don't eat whole. The more mahadran hashkafas won't allow that. They don't rely on that allowance. So grind the bugs and you're good. But others do, and they write. Like for example, they sold frozen strawberries, so they say you can't eat strawberries whole because they have infestation, and it's very difficult to check. But you can grind it and thereby nullify the bugs in 60. But beforehand, the bugs are not nullified in 60 because they haven't been destroyed, they haven't disintegrated. So long as the bug is whole, it's not nullified in the food. So 60 times won't help. Even 1,000 times won't help.
But these Bodek brands with frozen strawberries,
Yeah,
it's fine.
that's what I'm talking about.
Those are okay, right?
I don't know. I don't know where they're getting the strawberries from. I don't know what the deal is. Bottom line is that if you do grind it, it makes it a lot more lenient because it's most likely you're having at least, I hope, a 60-to-1 or greater ratio of strawberry to bug. So,
It's a strong texture, like grating, what do you call it?
they don't give this for strawberries.
They don't.
No.
And the broccoli
Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist.
Broccoli,
No. They don't give it.
So we shouldn't eat any of these broccolis or anything, ever?
No. I mean, technically, if you take the time to properly check it and go through it,
Or take off the
flowers.
flowers.
Right.
Finished.
Right.
What do you take off the flowers of the broccoli?
Just eat the stem.
Listen, artichokes. Artichokes are known to be very infested. They're very infested and they're very difficult to check and clean. I once bought an artichoke and I spent a very long time on it in cleaning it. I actually didn't find any bugs, but I, so in that case, I personally took the time out and I did it, so of course I'm allowed to eat it. There's no issue of eating a food that has infestation, there's just an obligation to check it out.
Lettuce also, lettuce.
Get rid of the infestation.
There's no issue to eat lettuce. But on the other hand, certain foods that have infestation to the point that even it's very difficult for the eye to catch. So that's when already, and even in Halacha, we find that we avoid eating that food because of that. And these things depend on country and time and seasons. All the time throughout history, there were, certain countries, certain foods were avoided because of the infestation and just the close to impossibility to properly check it, even if you were very honest and you took the time. So that's what it depends on. Okay, so we're going to leave Richard for next week the question of the cutting board. The question is like this. Number one, is it necessary to have a milchik, fleshik, and parav cutting board? Number two, what happens if you cut a food on a milchik cutting board? Can you use that food for fleshik? Number three, what happens if you cut a food on a milchik cutting board using a fleshik knife, or vice versa? Number four, what's the din if you did that and already then mixed the food with the opposite food, or milchik or fleshik?
All right, so we'll have 2, 3, and 4 are all corollaries of number one.
Yeah. Okay, so Mitch, we're going to cover this subject next week.
Okay.
You familiar with the Alter Rebbe's? I'm sure you are. We have sometimes trouble with